Hello, welcome to Nyambung, a program to make you click and connect with me, Dinna Raharja, and my co-host, Nadila Amani.
Yeah, okay, Bu Dinna. You mentioned a lot about multilateralism actually in the 75th UNGA resolution regarding to the United States to end Cuba embargo. As an ordinary person myself, this might sound a little complex, Bu Dinna, because now I think about the US, I think about the Cuba, and now I need to understand about multilateralism. Could you help me first understand what is multilateralism, Bu Dinna, before you go on sharing your thoughts about it?
Sure, Nadila. So the very simple definition of multilateralism is more than two countries coming together, being open about their standing in international politics. So a gathering of two countries being open about each other's standing in international politics is multilateralism. Usually they use certain platform, forum or dialogue meetings or something, or even organization to share, to discuss, and to look for common position on matters of concern. Multilateralism as a norm is adopted and recognized after the Second World War. The United Nations as an institution embody the norm of multilateralism. In the United Nations Charter, multilateralism is mentioned as determination to save future generations from war, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, to protect dignity of human, to provide equal rights of people, men and women, nations large and small. Everybody should enjoy social justice, peace, and social progress should be able to be enjoyed by every country around the world. So the principle of multilateralism is basically that, and it's a norm that is enhanced within the United Nations, basically. So if you look deeper into multilateralism, you would realize that multilateralism requires several things to work well. Number one, there should be conformity of member states. Everybody's working through the multilateralism forum to the principles and justice as agreed by everyone. So you have to conform. Number two, you have to behave in friendly manner based on respect, equity, and peace. You cannot sustain multilateralism with aggression and with behavior that's based on violence. The third requirement is the intent of parties to develop cooperation to solve problems instead of showing the intent to conflict or to revenge. You have to sit back and cooperate. The fourth is the recognition of equal sovereignty of all members. So everybody else on the table has the same right as you to enjoy all the things we have mentioned earlier: dignity, social justice, peace, and everything else. The fifth aspect of multilateralism assumes that everybody else who are not member also would act in accordance with the principles. So any multilateralism would organize themselves in a way that allow them to negotiate, to inspire the non-member states to adopt the spirit of multilateralism. And of course, that would also mean all member states doing multilateralism work would reciprocate in action. They would share mutual behavior of cooperation, of friendly relations, of respect, of looking at each other as equal partner. So that's multilateralism as a norm and as an institution. Are you now good on the basics of multilateralism, Nadila?
Okay, maybe now understand a little bit more, Bu Dinna. So, maybe I understand it as multilateralism is when more than two countries form a gang from an ally that share the same ideology on their international politics, right, Bu Dinna?
They have to form a good deeds of alliance, yeah, who shared some desire to achieve something together, and it should be shared.
Okay, Bu Dinna, now I understand.
Okay. Now, if you are good on that, we can move on to the multilateralism in practice.
Okay.
Of course, any norms and institutions, once practiced, may be more complex than imagined. Some unintended consequences may also be found. For instance, if you find a violation, if there's one member states or the party to the multilateralism who choose to violate the principles of the common goods, even if they are being very quiet about it, and worse, of course, if they are open and belligerent to the principles of the common goods, what do members do? How do they react? And what can the institution do? There's a terminology that people use. What's the point if the dog doesn't bark? So that's really critical, that if something bad is going on, what can the groups of country agreeing to multilateralism do? That's my first point. Second of all, people will watch. If the violator is a major country, would you do something about it? Can everybody else do something about it? Or would they just let it go? Like, it's not a big thing, it will solve itself. So one thing that everybody is realizing is that the logic of most countries nowadays is to be internationalist, which means that everybody is interested to grab all opportunities at the international level, and they would do anything necessary to make sure that they succeed in grabbing the opportunities. So the consequence of that may be, because it's the other side of the coin, is that once you see other people trying to take something away from you, you would like to go against it and try to balance your positions against those who may be perceived as disagreeing with you. So this is what people in the realist perspective see things. So they may sit together in multilateralism forum, but their mindset may differ from the principles of multilateralism itself. So I would show you several conditions, several circumstances that would enhance this realist perspective.
Okay.
So first is when multilateralism has to respond to global security issues, such as security dilemma. This is one serious block usually. Security dilemma is a situation where the action of one country is considered a threat to you, and so you would enhance yourself, either arm yourself or take a strong position against the country to show that you are threatened by them. And usually the reply would also be a perception of threat from the other party to you. So it will end up with a very enhanced sense of stronger threats. So this is what is usually not expected in international relations. Now, multilateralism usually cannot quite capture this kind of behavior. It can just happen between countries, and any kinds of rules usually may not constrain activities that raise worries, that raise fears, and some countries do have very paranoid perspective about other countries.
Yeah.
So that's number one situation. The second situation is when multilateralism agreement bring different implications for different countries. Either this is only at the perception level, or given different contexts, they may have different consequences for countries, or because the process of implementation itself will be different in different countries. So, for instance, the issue of human rights and terrorism. Let me give you the example of that. Internationally, of course, we would say human rights is universal to all nations. It should be something that everybody respect. But in different contexts where the awareness on human rights is uneven, and that the enforcement of respect to human rights is also uneven, one cannot quite pinpoint to the country that is supposed to be the duty bearer of the human rights as being ignorant about the human rights. Some would argue that we are not ignorant, we're just, we cannot simply blame the people and enforce sanctions, because it's also violating the process of them understanding better about human rights. So that's one example. Same thing with terrorism. On the one hand, combating terrorism is a universal value, but terrorism also comes from different groups. Some of them are vulnerable people. So whether certain action at the multilateral level can have negative impacts as well to the people on the ground, that's certain country affected would have things to say. It cannot be made uniform across the globe.
Okay.
So that's the second condition, the limits of multilateralism. The third limit of multilateralism is the condition where multilateralism agreement can be watered down. To get agreement at the UNGA, for instance, at the United Nations General Assembly, some countries do water down or make the wording much more ambiguous so that everybody can agree, which at the implementation level, it can be problematic. What we see in Myanmar is one example. You see that the UNGA decided that part of the solution should be done by ASEAN. And at the implementation level, this can be challenging because not all member states agree to swift action on Myanmar. So that's the limit of multilateralism. The fourth limit is that multilateralism doesn't eliminate bilateralism, or it doesn't exclude or reject countries from doing relations on two-country basis bilateralism.
Okay.
So everybody expects that bilateralism and multilateralism will be complementary. They should support each other. It will strengthen multilateralism. But in practice, it may be far from the expectation. Some countries in the region, in ASEAN, has been enhancing more and more their bilateral relations with certain country to get more benefits from multilateral agreements that is achieved. So rather than providing relatively equal share of benefits from multilateralism agreements, they would rather to get more, and they are willing to nurture this chance by strengthening their bilateral relations with the country that they think can provide more benefits. So these are the four limits, if you can say, about multilateralism. In UNGA, Nadila, you also have to realize this is the only body in the international level where everybody sits equally.
Okay.
One country, one vote. Regardless of how many population you have or how rich you are, you can only have one vote. And the mandate of the UNGA is basically, I call DDR, discuss, debate, recommend.
It's not the DDR that is from time zone, right? The indoor playground, the one that you dance on, the DDR. It's not that.
Maybe they take from that situation. I don't know, but so it's to make you easy to remember. UNGA has the 3 mandates: discuss, debate, and recommend.
Okay.
They can recommend things to be taken to the other bodies of the UN, and of course, if you want to take swift actions against something, usually you send a recommendation to the United Nations Security Council.
Okay.
So UNGA and whatever being decided inside of UNGA is, not quite having legally binding power. If every year we watch on TV, basically, usually, debates of world leader in the UNGA forum, because every member state is given the chance to speak. Yeah. And the leader of the country would read the statements. Although some countries in the past, the leader actually don't read from notes. They just keep talking, and they can talk for hours.
They just want to put what they have in mind. Yeah, Bu Dinna.
Indeed, it can sometimes be a show of power of some countries.
Yeah.
Well, the challenge, however, is to make the words substantive, right? You can say anything during the debate, but the point is whether you can deliver recommendations that would be followed up with concrete actions. And on top of it, Nadila, UNGA also has administrative mandate. They have to be the agency, the body that manages UN appointments and also make budget approvals. So activities of the UN, including of the Secretariat, needs to be approved by the UNGA. So it's a very busy but also very fat, big body of the UN. The products of UNGA is or include declarations, calls, and general debate. Yeah, the one I mentioned every year. There's once a year general debate, and then they also must schedule their time to elect non-permanent members of the Security Council and members of the Human Rights Council as recommended by UNSC. They also have to appoint Secretary General. So it's a very busy body of the UN. Maybe another fact that some of you is yet to realize: in the UN, every member states pay annual dues, and not everybody pay equally, though. Even though every country member has only one vote in UNGA, those who has higher GDP has to pay more than others, and some others can negotiate so they can pay lower than they're supposed to.
Is that good or not, Bu Dinna? Because it's actually embodied equity, right?
Can you guess which country pay the most to the UN?
Which, Bu Dinna? Which one?
The United States.
Oh, that's cool then.
Well, but that's one reason too why they under Donald Trump presidency, they feel that they are being disadvantaged because of that. They have to pay too much on something that may not benefit them, they say.
Oh yeah, they need to pay a lot more to become attacked.
This is one reason why they try to evaluate, they call it evaluate the multilateralism. So, and which is a good time for us now to talk about evaluation of multilateralism, right? Many have critiques, actually. Many have said that multilateralism inside of the UN has limits. Yeah, even the 2005 report from Secretary General Kofi Annan at that time mentioned that UNGA focuses a lot on trying to get consensus. The consequence of trying to get consensus is that you water down statements to get people to agree to it, to get the lowest common denominator. The challenge, if you do so, is that you would become less and less relevant to many problems that's growing in the world. So at that time, the suggestion was to include hearings from experts inside of the UN. And actually, if you look to the history, the UNGA has tried on time to time to remain relevant, because this is the only forum in the world where leaders of the world can take position on something. And it was not impossible, actually. So it's a choice of every generation sitting in the UNGA, I must say. If you look back in 1960s, the UNGA did suspend a South African delegation inside of the UNGA. Why? Because they practice apartheid, which they say is in violation of Security Council resolutions and international law. And they were only allowed to come back to the UNGA once a democratic transition was restored in 1994. And then in 1992, when Yugoslavia broken into pieces, Serbia and Montenegro were denied automatic inheritance of Yugoslav seat in the UNGA. So if I look closer to the UNGA, there are still reasons for us to be optimistic that something needs to be done. Something can be done, I should repeat in saying, because from time to time, if negotiators and diplomats are being very firm on pushing something through the UNGA, good things can happen through it. The latest position of the UNGA on Rohingya, I should commend as well as a good progress, because at least it comes to a position of condemning human rights abuses. A very good angle of the issue, human rights abuses. So that's why I think multilateralism cannot be underestimated and excluded as one of the mechanisms to find solutions, on many regional issues and national issues that we face lately.
Okay, Bu Dinna. I'm curious though, Bu Dinna, you said that the Assembly suspended the South African delegation because South Africa is violating resolutions and international law because they practicing apartheid. Does that mean multilateralism is not putting these countries that are not following the rules with sanction?
They cannot. The one who can impose sanctions in a very concrete sense, like embargo as a sanction, but in the real sense of actually putting people on the ground to make sure that all the flights and the sending of or the transporting of weapons and arms are not happening. That's not the UNGA to do. That's Security Council duty. So the mandate of Security Council is to follow up on what is being recommended by the United Nations General Assembly, so that it can be made more implementable.
Yeah.
So it's at the UNGA level, it's more about norms of the identifying the positions of all member states on certain matter that is written in the resolution of UNGA.
Okay, now I understand it now. So, UNGA resolution may not be binding to the countries, but we should not undermine what the resolution can bring to solve the problems, right, Bu Dinna?
Yes.
It's a place, it's like a place for conducting discussion and discussion on what the solution, right, Bu Dinna?
Yeah. So, multilateralism is still highly needed in today's world. The proliferation of problems emanating in different parts of the world requires common solution. You cannot expect every nationals to solve their own problems, because with the more internationalized cooperation, more internationalized travels, more internationalized interactions, economic, politics, social, culture, even illegal activities, we cannot expect each country of the world to solve problems on their own. Sometimes we have to share resources, sometimes we have to share strategy, sometimes we have to pay, invest together so that the impact of the action is more powerful. So multilateralism is really something that that is needed. But of course, what I've been talking about is that the future may be uncertain. Why? Because some countries decided to continuously trying to block decisions made at the multilateralism level. Even countries like the US have decided to pull out monies from multilateralism because they don't get what they want. So countries who realize that multilateralism is very much needed, needs to work extra to ensure that multilateralism doesn't collapse. So in the next podcast, we will discuss how the position of major countries such as the US, Russia, and China may affect conflicts and circumstances growing across the regions.
Okay. I'm looking for that, Bu Dinna, for the discussion. Thank you so much for your support once again. Our podcast is available at YouTube and Spotify at Nyambung with Dinna Praptora Harja. Make sure to send us your questions or your thoughts through YouTube comment section. And if you enjoy the episode, don't forget to like, share the link to your community, and subscribe so you make sure you don't miss our contents because we post every week.